And we're here, Conversations with Malik. I would like to thank everyone who listens and watches this show. Please don't forget to follow us at convoswithmalik.com. I'm here with a great guest. We was actually on a show together with Sister Nayala, right? Amaru, right? And we was on a show together, and we was debating politics. This was before the election, and that's how I met her. And listen, so she's her professional title is advocacy and political strategist, but we're gonna say she consults with grassroots organizations in the hood. You know what I'm saying? You know, she's in touch, even though she's smart, intelligent, educated, but she's in touch, and she's about the embetterment and the growth of our community. So whenever somebody fights for our community and they advocate on the part of of people who don't have as much, that means a lot to me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So, there's a lot going on right now, of course, and just for first of all, we got January 6th. Things were crazy. I believe that happened after I booked the show with you. There was some, been some things that have transpired.
Yes. A few things for sure.
Yeah, so we were supposed to, be talking about some other stuff, and we are. We're going to talk about, we got some, a mayoral race coming up, city council coming up, in June. And then they have this, I'm still trying to understand this ranked choice voting.
Right, yes.
So
some changes coming down the pipeline, which are important to us and our communities, right? That we are knowledgeable about what's going on and how it impacts us and how that impacts our representation in government.
Right. And politics are local, and people don't like getting involved in the local politics, but they don't realize that you can affect a lot of change there. So one of my questions to you is, why is local politics so important?
At the end of the day, the bullet point I would say, local politics is important to us, especially as Black, Indigenous, and Brown folks, for the following reasons. Government is the institution that has a formal power to invest in programs, to pass policies that impact us, particularly in a disproportionate manner, right?
Gotcha.
And if we are not, voting for representatives to go to bat for us and what's in our best interests, then we're losing out. But I also think it's important to redefine and rethink what we think politics is. So politics, from my experience and just a very brief background, I've been a grassroots organizer. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've worked for the mayor, city hall, city council. So my professional background is all up and through government, right? Politics is the process that decides how limited resources are allocated. And so when there's the electoral side, which is when we go and we vote, which is very, very important, right? For those representatives to fight for us and represent us. And then there's politics in the form of advocacy, which is the process of holding our government officials accountable. And so I think sometimes what's lost in translation, especially through an electoral lens, is there's this push to go vote every 4 years focused on presidentials. But oftentimes there's not that attention invested in our local government, our city council members, our county commissioners, our school boards, right? Whose programs and policies impact your life so much more directly than the presidential election every 4 years, which again, you should vote in those as well.
Those people you can't even reach,
right?
That you probably will never see.
Exactly.
But you can see and touch your state assemblymen or women, councilmen, etc.
That's right. And so local politics, again, I like to challenge people to think about it more than just the voting aspect, but to also think about it as a way of Advocacy, is that writing a letter of complaint to your council member or your assembly member? Is that a matter of showing up to their office or engaging in town halls? Advocacy takes so many different forms and is accessible to everybody. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that we're holding government at the local level, state level, and federal level accountable, because these folks will get away with what they can get away with, not necessarily like in a criminal sense, although there are those there are those
been some,
that's
some
another
those.
conversation.
I mean, listen, I think we just went through one of the most corrupt
yes,
administrations
absolutely
in the history.
Absolutely.
And they made it so normal.
And I think that's where our power as Black folks, as brown folks, to our, Latina brothers and sisters, historically disenfranchised folks, our power is really not exercised consistently and in the way that it can be in order to make sure that government, the folks who represent us, are bringing home the bacon. They're delivering the goods. And there's this popular saying in the political spheres, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose, which basically is saying politicians will say whatever it is they need to say to get elected, right? And then when it comes to the actual governance, then all of a sudden it's, they're hemming and hawing. And the hemming and hawing can go on unless there's organized efforts of folks in various communities saying, wait a minute, you said A, B, and C, that you would deliver A, B, and C. Right. And so now we're here to make sure that you come through on your promise. And if you don't, then when it comes to the next electoral cycle, then we're not going to vote for you, and we're going to find someone else who is a better representative of our needs and our interests as communities. So like that's why local politics is so important to us.
That we need. That road is bumpy.
Yes.
Kids are getting hit coming out of school.
That's
at
right.
This school over here. There's been 8 accidents. You can do something directly in as far as calling DOT.
Yep.
To get a street sign.
Yep.
And I really, really wish that people would more come out in droves when it comes to even stuff like violence in the community. Look, I remember the boy got chopped up in the Bronx. I forgot his name. The guys thought he did something. It was mistaken identity. This was a couple of years ago, and you remember they stabbed him up, and it was broad daylight. He ran in the store. What's this boy's name? And it was like the community came out in droves. Like this boy was murdered, broad daylight. Ran in the grocery store. The guys pulled him out. This gang in the Bronx. And the community came out in droves. But there's things we could do as far as even violence in the community, putting pressure on the police precincts, right? You want your community safe, hold those people accountable. We pay their salaries.
Right, yep.
The officers work for us.
Yep.
So, and everybody that's in office represents us now. So this is kind of, I'm sitting there and I'm listening on January 6th. And the people, they have a right to march on the Capitol, right? Yes, they believe in false information. And so on one hand, I understand, you have a right to make your voice heard. The only thing is you don't have a right to try to take over the government. As you was watching, what were you thinking?
I was feeling all the feels as I was, watching all of that unfold. One, I was holding on to anger in the sense of this is yet just another glaring example of how whiteness works in America. Because had it been one of us, there's no way that we ever would have made it through that first barricade in the Capitol. We would have been shot and killed on the spot. But yet whiteness creates access to be able to engage in these type of violent behaviors, and for it just to be like a, shaking a fist, shame on you, you weren't supposed to do that. The other part that I held that day was fear, in the sense of there's a lot to be said about, the Trump administration and how he incited racial violence and gender violence and all the violence against folks who weren't straight white men, essentially, right? But I'm always very conscious of the fact that white supremacy and systems of misogyny and oppression were here long before Trump, and his actions and his speech
Great point.
brought it to the forefront in a way that had not been before. But when I was watching what happened in the Capitol, the fear that I felt was because I don't believe that was the end. Trump has tapped into an underworld, like the underbelly of America, that I think a lot of folks in America would like to forget exists, who likes to say, oh, well, that was back in the olden days, and folks of that thinking are dying off because they're an older generation. But I remind folks, back in 2017, when I watched those marches, I saw folks who were in their 20s and 30s.
Yes.
So these are folks who are believing in things that most of us would like to think people no longer believe in.
And
right?
they do.
And they do. And so when I was watching what was going on this 6th, there is an entire group of people, we may not even know their numbers, right? But are so committed to this belief that our government and our system of government, our institution, is inherently corrupt, which we can analyze in many ways, but that they are entitled to use their whiteness to take over the institutions that protect my life. Right. As a Black woman, right? That protect lives of so many people from marginalized communities. Right. And so my fear that I was holding on to was, this is just a symptom. We have not even gotten to the root of how many people believe in Trump's message. Yeah. And the fact that despite everything that has transpired over the last 4 years, over 70 million Americans still voted for him. And I think that's something that we need to
that's a lot of people
talk about and address,
that's a lot of people. Because
that's to me, I've learned to say I'm never surprised but always disappointed when whiteness shows how it works in America. And I think that what happened on the 6th is yet just again another example of how white folks, through all the systems that benefit them, can do whatever they want to do. Yeah. And again, I think it was just a symptom of not just the last 4 years, although amplified by the last 4 years. Yeah. But again, there's millions and millions of people in America, in the underground, out in public, who believe what Trump was saying.
They believe what he was saying.
Yep.
And I think that they also, don't always believe him. This is just a theory of mine, a hypothesis.
All right, talk to me.
I think that they don't always believe him, but I think that they know that we don't like him. So they like the fact that they know that we don't like him.
So he's a trigger.
Yeah, and they know that he's against us. Mm-hmm. And so they're against us. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's their excuse to be how they want to be in the first place. I don't think they really, really, really believe him. Not all of them. Some of them do. But I think they are just like, they're just like kind of like, so what? So what if he's lying? Yeah. I don't like them anyway. Mm-hmm. So what, he's doing bad by them? Right. I don't like them anyway, so I'm gonna go along with it. Right. Just like when Black men and women used to get lynched, they used to have a ritual on Sundays. This Sunday there's gonna be a lynching, and people come out with their picnic baskets and their children, and they would sit there knowing that guy didn't rape that white girl. That white girl was fast. She slept around. There were stories about her sleeping with Black men, right? They know he ain't rape her. But we gonna hang him anyway. Yeah. Yeah. We know Emmett Till, little boy, don't deserve, on vacation, visiting his family, doesn't deserve to get beat up by grown men to death. It just wasn't the point. The point was, we don't like you. Yep. Yeah. So it's not, to me, it's not really rooted in truth. It's not really rooted, it's rooted in hatred. I was watching a special last year. It was about the civil rights movement. And they interviewed this white guy. And he said, so they was interviewing him, and they said to him, they said, well, the person asking him the question said, well, do you think God would want you to hate your brother and sister, another person, because of the color of their skin? And he said, I hate black people because I hate black people. He said, but I hate God more for making them. So,
That's deep.
with something, he said, but I hate God more for making them. So, what do you say?
Yeah.
There's no reasoning with that.
Yeah.
That person, just has hate. And so Steve Bannon, which was, he was Trump's political strategist. I went back and I looked up a lot of Steve Bannon's old stuff from what he believes in. And he's really like the Dark Lord of the Sith, for all my Star Wars fans. He really planted a lot of stuff. He was really, really planting a lot of stuff in Trump's mind, stuff that he knew that Trump, I guess, kind of already had there. And Trump played to a portion of this country that he knew was there.
Yep.
And so like you said, it's not just older people out there. There was a bunch of young people, firefighters from Long Island.
Yep.
People you probably in the store with. People who had stuff to lose, who had careers. Where do we go from here?
It's interesting because I know through the political lens, the electoral lens, Biden's administration initially was and still is focused on unity. We have to, heal the soul of a nation. And I sit from a space where I'm looking at, to your question, how do we even begin to heal from what has transpired when literally at least 70 million, we're even just talking about registered voters. We're not even talking about folks who didn't even bother we're talking about the people who came out and voted. We're not even talking about the folks who could have voted, the folks who think the same way. So I don't think that politics is the path towards collective liberation and healing for our people. I do think, however, it is a very useful tool because of the power that government has in terms of controlling programs and policies that can move us towards healing in our communities. With that said, what does healing look like for us, right? Because I think that's a conversation that has so many different ideas and approaches of, for some folks, healing for our communities is we finally get government resources and programs and policies that are beneficial to us.
Right.
Yes, that's true. However, what is justice? What is justice and atoning for everything that American history has put so many communities through?
Yes.
Right? Will, programs and financial investment, or dare I say reparations, be the panacea that solves that? I think that it's a multi-pronged journey of how do we move forward collectively when, one, there are divisions even within our own communities, right? And so we have to, address that. Two, there are competing ideas of how to move forward, right? Do we want small incremental changes in trying to work within the current systems that we're in? Or do we want revolution and try to burn it all down and build something back again that is centered on our needs instead of white supremacy? And these are conversations that take place all day, every day, at the kitchen table, in, academia. And I think for me on a personal level, it's not an either or analysis. It's a both and, right? As someone who works professionally in the political sphere, I fundamentally believe in the power of government. I see government as a tool to be used.
Gotcha.
One, because the purpose of government is to represent we the people, right? The issue has been because of systems of oppression, we the people has never included folks like you and me.
And the lobbyists.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And so I look at politics, I look at electoral politics and advocacy as a tool towards healing, in that we can organize and build in our communities and hold government accountable so we do get that investment that has been denied from us for so long. But the other part of it, again, from a personal lens, is the spiritual and recalibration of ourselves internally and collectively as communities. Again, I don't think that with the harm and trauma that we have suffered generationally is necessarily going to be healed because all of a sudden we receive government resources. And I think that's the longer, deeper journey, aside from, government representation and holding folks accountable, which we absolutely should. But I think that's, the question for the generations, is to challenge ourselves to think about, what does healing look like to us? What is the path forward, aside from this talking point of Joe Biden's call to action is, I have to unite everybody. Well, let's unpack that. How do you unite us with folks who want to kill us?
Yeah.
And there is no easy answer to that.
Yeah. And I'm like, Joe, please, okay, I get it. But we got all three. The Democrats have all three branches of government.
That's right.
Let's get some stuff done, bro.
That's right. Don't sit on it. Don't do it. Don't do what Obama did.
We got a 2-year window. Right?
Yep.
Is a chance we could lose the House or the Senate back or something.
Yep.
Let's clean up some stuff now.
That's right.
And I get the whole kumbaya, and I understand that he's been around, but they don't talk kumbaya.
They don't care.
When they're in.
They don't care. They don't give a damn.
Yeah. Yeah. And so healing and us growing as a community, and the grassroots organizations play a key role in the development of the community. So yes, politics is a tool you talked about. But then as a community, what things do the organizations, the grassroots organizations themselves need to do more in addressing the issues that lie within the community?
When I talk about communities, I always invite people to define for themselves what that means and how it shows up for themselves in their lives. That could be communities as in our local neighborhoods. Communities could be related to experiences that we've gone through. I'm a veteran, so that's a community that I belong to. Communities could be identities, Black, woman, whatever identities that we carry are pathways into communities that we can become a part of. So that's the first thing, is to define for ourselves what communities mean to us, which communities we belong to, and find a home in those spaces. Right. I think in the most general terms, whatever community you are a part of, understand that that's collective power, right? And from a political lens, politicians care about three things and three things only: press, money, and votes. And so for us...
That is so true.
You better write that down, because that's the listen. Press, money, and votes.
Press, money, votes. That is so true.
Those are the three things, and the three things only they give a damn about. And so when it comes to communities, knowing that it's a collective effort and power, thinking about, as a collective, how can we influence any of those three things at any given time, and use it as a tactic to influence what we are asking of the government. Right. And I think that's incredibly important, especially for those of us who come from historically marginalized communities. We have been historically marginalized because we have not organized, right? Because we have not identified and built our communities in a way that is long-term and sustainable. I'm defining community as like my local neighborhood, right? And let's say government decides they want to do a new planning project. We know where this is going, right? And so let's say they want to add a Starbucks, and at the expense of maybe an old senior citizen center, or maybe it was a youth, recreational center. And folks will get upset and they'll organize, and then depending on what happens, people will disband afterwards. But the opportunity that's lost in that is that government/elected officials will see, okay, so this is not an organized, sustained organization, because these folks are not in it for the long haul. If it's like a whack-a-mole game, back in the day at the arcade. I might be dating myself, but you're always whacking the mole. You don't really know where it's gonna pop up next, but when it pops up, you're gonna whack it. There's no strategy in that, right? And I think sometimes that's how we respond as folks who belong to marginalized communities, that we don't have that long-term strategy that's shared amongst us, so that we're not playing whack-a-mole, right? We are strategically and tactically pooling our resources, our talents, our skills, our networks into building the strength of our communities. So when government comes down with some nonsense decision, whether that's a program or a policy or a new development, they know not to try it the way that they know not to try folks, who are better well-resourced.
Right, because we're not gonna tolerate it.
We're not gonna tolerate it.
We're just gonna show up as soon as something happens. We're gonna address it, and it's funny. That's one of the things that I noticed in Harlem last week. There was this girl who there was this lady. She went in the liquor store, and a young lady, and the guy started to harass her, trying to talk to her. And because she wouldn't give the guy her number, they started messing with her. One of them bit her face, right? And the next day, the community came out, and they were at that liquor store, and it was hundreds and hundreds of people. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. See, we have to, if we're going to come out when, somebody, now look, I get when black man gets shot, it's going to generate a whole different type of feeling. I get that. And sometimes us, the black on black crime. And I say to people, listen, all communities, there's white on white crime, there's Arab on Arab crime. The crime in the community is usually the people against each other because they live in the same community. So this whole thing on black crime is really overblown because, most instances of aggression is towards somebody that looks like you because that's who you're around. So yes, the outcry and the protests and the feeling is gonna be different when it's somebody from outside of the community that does it, especially a law enforcement, somebody that's supposed to be protecting us. But I love how the community came out and showed up, and I say that to say it was grassroots organizations in Harlem that that put this together, and I think that we need to do more of really coming out and showing up for all of the things in the community. From not having enough books in a school, make a big stink about it. Not just a couple of people that's there at the PTA board trying to send some letters. The whole community come out. If it's PS 181 in Rosedale, all those people from Rosedale, I think the grassroots communities going forward need to do more of a better job at, and it's not just their fault because the people have to complain. So also collectively as a people, we have to make a fuss about everything.
That's right.
Because there's state assembly people, there's city council people, there's all these people in place that we bring this to them, and then it's their job to bring it.
That's right.
To bring it to Albany, get a vote on it, and get change done. And I've seen it when stuff goes down. If you complain, like listen, around here people don't play. It's potholes and stuff like that. You call a day or two later, it's like done.
There you go.
And it's not so you say, oh, because my community's mixed. You know, bowling's always been, there's a lot of black professionals around here. So bowling's always been like, you know, for about 20, 30 years, been like really evenly mixed. But you say, people will say, oh, if this was, like if you're in an all black community and you say, oh, if this was the white community, they would have been fixed this. It's not, okay, yes, they do care more about in white communities, right? So yes, I'm being honest about that. Yes.
Yep.
But I run school buses, so I'm a school bus owner. And I run school buses in white districts. And when there's something wrong with the bus, if there's an issue, I'm hearing it. And it's like, you know, the parent that calls, it's almost like they just like get on your nerves so much. You just want to fix the problem just to stop hearing their mouth. Now with us, yeah, I'm not going to say, you know, our people care about their kids. But a little more can slide. Not that I run my buses in any other way.
Right.
But just, you know, a little more can slide.
Right.
And I think that instead of us saying, oh, if this was this community, this wouldn't be happening. Instead of us, the reason why in that community it doesn't happen and it gets addressed because they keep beefing until it gets changed.
Yep.
Right or wrong?
Yep. No, you're right. You said something that made me think about something. It was real deep in the sense of when white folks don't have things perfect, they make a fuss. And when folks in our communities know that something ain't, you know, right, we just kind of like deal with it. We let things pass. And I remember I had a conversation a while ago, but basically it connects to the point that you made in that historically, because of our history and so many other marginalized folks' history, we are conditioned to be grateful for whatever we have.
Okay. And
if the bus is a rinky-dink bus, don't complain. You better be grateful.
Glad you're getting the bus to school.
Yep. And the impact of that, though, of that conditioning, I think one, it's historical and it's generational and clearly it's racial. But how it impacts how we show up and interact with our government institutions. If the bus lines are constantly running late in a certain neighborhood that might look like me.
We get home.
Right.
You know, we find out Jordan had a fight.
That's right.
Then our other daughter is taking our headphones.
That's right. Well, I don't know about all that. But the
and then it's this, and then we got to pick up this one from the babysitter.
That's
and do homework, and then, you know, and then by the time the night comes and a couple more days, and then we forget. So I get that.
It's real. And yeah, back to your point, it's just like oftentimes, depending on our identities, our experiences in life are so much different. And so while every community deserves to have reliable, safe transportation, it's probably at the, you know, low bottom of
the SHIT.
Right.
I don't know why this is a podcast, and I usually, for some reason, I don't feel like cursing around that.
No, listen.
I just want to be on my best. But this is podcasting.
It's all good. Listen, I was in the Army for 4 years, so you can't say nothing I ain't heard of already.
You haven't heard. I'm pretty sure. Oh, my goodness. Especially when they get drunk. Oh, goodness gracious. And so in closing, what is going forward? What are like 3 of the most important things that you feel that we have to do as a community to address these days and times we're in? COVID, social distance, businesses being closed, people out of work. You know, what do you see that kind of 3 of the most important things that we need to do to kind of survive in this whole thing?
I'm going to move from like the broader to like the more narrow and focused.
Okay.
I think before we can really start engaging and, you know, checking off items on our to-do list on how we can build better and be stronger, I think it's so important that we individually and as our communities, again, however we choose to define that, challenge our understanding of power. As an organizer and as a lobbyist and just someone who works in politics, I work with a lot of quote unquote powerful people. I use that in quotations. I know this is a podcast, so you can't see me using my air quotations. But power is subjective. Throughout history, we have not had traditional forms of power. Now there are more of us who, we've had success in some ways of, getting representation in government. But I think sometimes people shy away from engaging or thinking that they can't be part of the solution to the problems that they live through or that they know is going on in the neighborhood because they think that they don't have the power. And it's because we're understanding power in a very narrow, traditional lens of I don't have a title or I don't have access to certain people. And I call bullshit on that. We all have the self-agency to redefine what power means, what power is, and what it looks like. And Malika looks like us. When we recognize that power is us, then there's this shift in our energy, in our psychological view of ourselves, in that we have that sense of entitlement that white folks are inherently born with, in the sense of if something ain't right, then I have the power to be a part of the solution that can fix this problem and help heal our communities, revitalize my neighborhood. But first and foremost is to challenge ourselves to rethink this concept and practice of power, which historically has not looked like us, that we historically have not had access to if we think about it in the traditional sense. But if you think about it in a different way and understand organizing is power. A few years ago, this is a very New York-centric example, but a few years ago, people were like, oh, you want to pay Black and Latino folks $15 an hour for flipping burgers? Good luck with that. But those Black and Latino folks who are working for a subpar minimum wage, they getting paid $15 an hour because of organizing, right?
Right.
And that was something that was not even considered politically feasible 5 years ago.
Right.
But collectively,
Right.
they were able to redefine and challenge that traditional norm of power and exercise their own and be a solution to the problem that they were experiencing.
Right. And so as a result of that, and listen, I always thought that the minimum wage should be higher, even as an employer. I just thought it should be higher.
Yeah.
Because people, if people are making more, I believe that they're gonna work harder. It's gonna be an incentive. It puts more money into the economy. And then you just have healthier people all around.
Right.
So are you taking a COVID vaccine if it's available? Would you take it?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would take it.
Okay.
But
I would too.
I think it's also important to address why folks in our community don't trust it. And I think, again, that goes back to history and medical racism.
Yes, I get that.
One of my pet peeves has been the narrative, again, I'm doing air quotes, listeners, is that, well, Black folks don't trust the vaccine. And I think the talking point should be American government has screwed over and caused harm, communities to us. So it's not like we're not just trusting the government or not just trusting the vaccine. And that's lost in the conversation. And so my long answer to your question is I would take the vaccine. But I also think it's important that there is a broader conversation and actions that are taken directly to address the medical racism that so many communities suffer from.
And still suffer from.
And
still a lack of adequate, inadequate health care and everything. So, and I would take it. But it's funny because the baseball legend Hank Aaron just passed away. And he took the vaccine. Now, I understand he was 83, 85 or whatever. But he took the vaccine, passed away shortly thereafter.
Right.
Just a little.
Right.
I mean, because the brother looked good. He just recently
Yes.
on TV, looked
Yep.
healthy.
Yep.
You know, people of color, we don't crack easy. He
sure
looked like he
don't.
was 70, you
Yep,
know?
yep.
and he passed. So I think with this, there's going to be casualties of the vaccine, unfortunately.
Right.
But hopefully the good outweighs the bad.
That's right.
And we could get to herd immunity, get a hold on this thing, and begin to get back to normal life. Listen, any closing words that you would like to share with the listeners? Words of wisdom from Nayala Amaru.
I don't know about words of wisdom, but, sharing lessons I've learned in my journey, knowing, my sphere of influence is advocacy and politics. Again, I just invite your listeners to think about the concept and practice of power, to engage in advocacy and be part of the solution to the issues that we know plague our communities, no matter where we may be. The last thing I will say is, I guess I'll share a lesson learned. I used to work for Congressman John Lewis years ago. I'm originally from Georgia.
Okay.
I worked for him on the Hill.
Oh, all right.
And one of the things that I was always in awe of him about was he was such a simple and modest man and always made himself accessible. But he was one of the few elected officials who lived his values. I know that I'm in the advocacy political sphere, but no matter what your industry may be, personally or professionally, I think just to walk this life in the skin we're in with the experiences that we may have, one of the most important lessons I learned to make the best of this journey, no matter what it may throw at us, is that if we are able to align the decisions that we make with the values that we proclaim to be important to us, then no matter what the journey brings our way, that we are walking in the right direction, so long as we are living our values. And again, no matter what our industry may be, whatever your affiliation may be, no matter what your identities may be, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make it, and some of us are committed to trying to make it better. But that is a lesson I've learned from him, watching him make decisions that were not easy, but without doubt reflected what he lived his life by. And I think in society, it's so easy to get caught up in the things that don't matter, things that are shiny or superficial.
Yes. That are here now and they fade easy.
That's right. But the best lived life is a life that is aligned with what makes our heart sing and what sets our soul on fire. And so long as you live into that, then wherever your journey takes you, it will be in the right direction.
Tell everybody how they can find you.
I'm on Twitter. I'm probably the only person who's not on Instagram.
Okay.
But I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. You can find me at my first name, last name at NAILAHAMARU. Hit me up. I tweet about politics, policy, programs, white supremacy, and I look forward to staying in community with you and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And remember, I close the show in the usual fashion. Brother Malik loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Peace.